it's Krystal Everdeen, and today I'm going to show you how to crochet this striped one-piece swimsuit. Now originally I was working on making a striped two-piece set, but decided to just combine the two and make a one-piece. So this is actually my very first attempt on a crochet one-piece, and I actually think it came out pretty good, besides, you know, me looking like a bumblebee. But anyway, let's get started. For this project I use size 4 yarn from the brand Impeccable in black, and size 4 yarn from the brand Red Heart in tan. I also used a size 5mm hook, and the first thing that I did was grab my tan yarn and made a slip knot. Once I created my slip knot, I chained a chain that was long enough to wrap around my torso from one rib to the other. And what I mean by that is I made a chain that was long enough to cover from here all the way over to right here. For me, it's about 75 stitches, but of course it's going to be different for everyone. So once you have completed that chain, you're going to go back on it using a double crochet. And if you're not familiar with double crochet or you're new to crochet in general, I will have a Crocheting for Beginners video linked in the description box below. But just as a refresher, a double crochet is yarn over through the stitch, yarn over back through the stitch. You're left with 3 loops, yarn over through 2 loops, then yarn over through the last 2 loops. Again, double crochet is yarn over through the stitch, yarn over back through the stitch. Then you will be left with 3 loops on your hook. You're going to yarn over again, go through 2 loops, then you're going to yarn over one more time and go through the last 2 loops. And that is a double crochet, and you're going to do that throughout the entire chain. And again, if you are unfamiliar with or you need a refresher on basic stitches, I do have the Crocheting for Beginners video down in the description box below. You can practice with that for a bit and then come back to this video, or practice with that for a bit and then try an easier project. I believe I do have easier projects linked within that Crocheting for Beginners video. So yeah, I have plenty of really cool crochet projects for you on my channel, so enjoy. But back to this tutorial. So I am approaching the end of this first row of double crochet with the tan yarn. So I'm going to make sure that I go into this very last stitch here. And once I do, I have completed my first row, and at the end of each row, I'm going to make sure that I flip it over, chain 1, and then continue making double crochets by first going into that very first stitch, making sure that it's the very first stitch, because if I start skipping stitches here, then the edges are not going to be even, and that's not good. I also want to make sure that I go into this stitch right here instead of the big opening of the double crochet. That way it will just look nicer. I mean, you can go into the large stitch if you want to, but I feel like it looks weird. So this is what your project should look like so far, and easy peasy, you're just going to make another row of double crochet. And once you reach the end here, I decided that this is where I want to change colors. So I'm going to make sure that I go into the very last stitch as always, chain 1, flip it over, and this is what my project looks like so far. It's just 2 rows of double crochet. Now I'm going to grab my black yarn and attach it to where I just finished my last stitch. And this is how I attach it. It's really hard to explain how I do it. I pretty much just transfer the yarn onto my hook and then stop using the tan yarn and just begin using the black yarn. And that's just how I do it. But I used to do it so that I cut the tan yarn and then I tie a knot with the black yarn and the tan yarn, and then I continue with the black yarn. But I find cutting it and tying a knot constantly really tedious, so this is how I like to attach it, but of course you could attach it whichever way you like. So once you attach your second color, you're just going to continue with another row of double crochet, a total of 2 rows with that color as well to make it nice and even. And then once you reach the end of the second row of that color, You're going to, of course, make sure that you go into the very last stitch. And once you do, you're going to grab your other color, bring it on up if you attached it like I did, and then just transfer the color with your hook like so. So instead of using the black yarn, you're now using the tan yarn. And then of course, you're going to make sure that you go into that very first stitch and then continue making your double crochets for yet another row. And you're going to continue doing this until you put this portion of your project against your body, and it covers from your hips to above your belly button. And once the project is wide enough to cover from your hips to above your belly button, then it's time to change it up a little bit and start making a halter top shape. And I am rather short, so it really didn't take me many rows to reach this point. So this is going to be my last row of doing what we normally did with the chaining one at the end and then flipping it over and then going into the very first stitch and then continuing with all the double crochets in every single stitch. Now we're going to skip this second stitch right here. So you're still going to chain one at the end and go into the very first stitch, but the difference is you're now going to skip that second stitch and go right into the third stitch. And what that's going to start doing is, instead of the project being square, it's going to start looking a little more triangular and forming that halter top shape. And that's exactly what you want. So after you've skipped that second stitch and go right into the third stitch, you're just going to continue with the rest of the row without skipping any more stitches. You're only going to do this at the end of each row. So just continue on with the double crochets for the rest of the rows and even skip colors like normal. But just in case, I'm going to show you how I skip colors. So this is my second row of tan. I'm going to make sure that I go even into the very last stitch. And now I'm going to change colors. Now I'm going to use my black yarn. I've just attached my black yarn. Now I'm going to chain one, flip it over, go into this very first stitch, and then skip over that second stitch there. Then go into the third stitch and make a double crochet. And now you can see that even this side is starting to look more triangular. It's starting to pull in. And this is called decreasing because you're decreasing the number of stitches per row because you're skipping a stitch. And that's it. Just follow that pattern, and after a number of rows, you're definitely going to see that it's starting to look more and more like a halter top, which is exactly what you want. So you're just going to continue with this process of switching colors after every 2 rows. Also that you skip the second stitch of every new row. So at the end of each row, you're going to chain one, flip it over, go into the very first stitch, but then skip over the second stitch and then continue on with the rest of the row of double crochet. So you're going to crochet as many rows as you need in order to make a project that is large enough so that when you place it against your body, it covers from your hips all the way up to your collarbone. And again, because I am rather short, it really didn't take me too many rows to do that. So this is my completed halter shape. This is what's going to cover the front portion of my body. And now I'm going to work on the straps. So from one end of the row, I'm going to chain a very long chain of about 175 chains. And the reason why I make such a long chain is because I want this strap to have a crisscross design. So start from my shoulder and cross over to the small of my back and then cross over again where I can tie it at the small of my back. But if you want just a couple of small straps that say wrap around your neck, then you don't have to make a chain so long, but this is just the way I like to do it. So after I've made my very long chain, I go back on that chain with a slip stitch just to make it a little bit thicker and a little bit more comfortable. And then I attach yarn to the opposite side of the row, and I make a chain that is just as long, and then I go back on it with a slip stitch as well, and then I cut the yarn from the yarn ball and seal the project. Now it's time to work on the slightly more complicated portion, which is the bottom portion of this one-piece swimsuit. So because the first color that I used for the top portion was tan, I'm now going to attach black to the tan piece. So my first row for the bottom portion will be black and match with the rest of the design. So all I'm doing is attaching the black yarn to one of the ends of the rows and then continuing with a double crochet. So I'm actually going to create 3 rows of double crochet all across the bottom portion of this top here. So 2 rows of black and then most of a row of tan. And I say most of a row of tan because this is where it gets a little bit tricky. So instead of doing the entire row right here, I'm actually going to skip this portion, probably like 3 inches worth of the top. So originally I was going to decrease like I did the top portion for the halter shape, but I need the project to decrease way faster in order to make the bikini effect. So I needed to skip about 3 inches worth of space on each side. That way the bikini forms much faster because the decrease is much faster because there's less rows that you're working on. So that's exactly what I did, and you may need to do that or you may not need to do that depending on, of course, your project and your body shape. So what I did here is I decreased like I said, and then at this portion right here I made everything even, so I no longer decreased. I made sure to chain 1 and then go into every single stitch for these rows right here so they're nice and even. And this is the portion of the bikini that you actually sit on. So this is the bikini shape right here. I'm going to fold it, and now I'm going to work on the back portion, basically what covers your butt. So in order to do that, we need to do the opposite of decrease, and we're going to increase. And in order to increase, all you need to do is, instead of skipping stitches, you're now going to add stitches. And all you need to do is chain 2 and then go back on those newly chained chains and create double crochets from those chains. So this is my first new double crochet, and then I'm going to make a second double crochet from the other chain that I made, and then I'm going to continue on and make a double crochet from the regular stitch. This was originally the first stitch of the row, but now there's an additional 2 double crochets on that row now. So it's like a little addition here. And what that's going to do is that's going to start bringing it out instead of bringing it in like we did before. And that's exactly what you want, because you need this to get bigger and not smaller, because again, it needs to cover your butt. So yeah, and again, depending on your body shape, you may need to chain more to make this portion of the bikini much larger, or if you're smaller size, then 2 should be just fine. But again, it depends on your body type, so just go off of your body. Another great way to make a bikini that will fit you is to grab a bikini that you already have, or maybe even a pair of underwear that you have, and go based on its shape. So I prefer a bikini, that way you could take off the straps on each side and then open it up and see its true shape. It's basically a small triangle shape and then that even part in the middle, and then it goes back to a larger triangle shape, and that's basically what a bikini looks like. and that's what you're trying to recreate here. So after my second row of black, I'm going to continue with the alternating of colors. So I finished my row here. Now I'm going to grab my tan yarn and then add 2 chains to the end of that row. That way I can go back on those 2 chains and create 2 new double crochets to add to that row. And you see that I'm making this on top of the previous row's new double crochets as well. That way each row that you create, it's just making the project wider and wider, and that's what your goal is, to continue making this wider and wider. That way it could properly fit you and give you good coverage. So yeah, that's it. You're just going to continue with that pattern of increasing every single row and also alternating colors as you wish until finally you have completed this shape. And now all you have to do is fold the project so that it fits with the one piece and then attach each side here, and then you're pretty much done. And what I mean by attach, all you have to do is either sew it or just slip stitch the 2 together as I did. And then once those are nice and attached, then I grab the straps and crisscross them, and all you have to do to crisscross them is grab them with your hook, bring them through the stitch you want them to go through, and then grab the opposite strap and attach them opposite of each other. That way they're symmetrical and they tie at the bottom. And once you have placed the straps where they're supposed to be, then you're completely done with the project. Woohoo! Now, like what I said earlier in the video, I do wish I chose 2 different colors so that I don't look so much like a bumblebee, but overall I think it came out pretty good, especially for it being my first one piece I ever even attempted to make. Yeah, it came out pretty decent. And I just wanted to thank you very much for watching this video. If you found this tutorial helpful or entertaining, please give it a thumbs up and also click that red subscribe button if you have not already, so I can see you next time. Bye!